Narrate my Substack article here for those that want to listen to it later on. Okay, so the information regarding MN words from one of my favorite books, The Esoteric Structure of the Alphabet by Alvin Boyd Kuhn, has always stuck with me since I read it in 2019. It's another example of the spirit-matter polarity that we must understand with regard to our lives. Here are pertinent passages I've selected from the book. I've included images to illustrate certain points as well as some commentary in brackets and after the passages at the end. Even the alphabet embodied the central structure of all ancient literature, the incarnation, the baptism of fire soul in and under body water. The top or beginning letters are A and B, and should the A alone or combined with B represent fire. The middle letters coming at the base of the arc are M and N, and mirabile dictu, they represent water. From A to M, then, the descending arc traces the downward or involutionary plunge of fire into water, reaching its lowest depth with M. From N back to the final letter, whatever it be in different languages, the upward return arc represents the arising out of water and the return through evolution of the heavenly fire to its true home, completing the cycle. So here's the alphabet wheel, so you can see if you put A at the top, and the 13th letter is at the bottom, and then 14th is starting to go back up to Z, the 26th letter. The celestial fire emanated from primal source as one ray, but soon radiated out in triadic division, and finally reached the deepest heart of matter in a sevenfold segmentation. But in its first stage of emanation, it was always pictured as triform. The yod candle flame being its type form, the Hebrews constructed their letter, which was to represent the fire principle with 3 yods at the top level, with lines extending downward to a base, on which all 3 met and were conjoined in one essence. This gives us the great fire letter, Sh, or Shin. So here's what he's talking about. And this is coming from Yod. So Yod is the 10th letter. And he's pointing out that it's like a candle flame. And as you can see, it's being blown by someone. And that someone would be, you could say whatever you want, God, the Father, Spirit. So, and then you combine the 3. And then he was talking about the triadic division and then the 7. So the 3 would be the top of the Sephirot, Keter, Chokmah, and Binah. And that would be corresponding to the Trinity. And then many people say that 7 would be the planets, or corresponding to the planets. You have the dot, which is a hidden Sephirot. But the triform fire symbol was only possible as the result of the one first ray bifurcating into the 2 fires of spirit and matter and uniting to generate their product, which became the third 2-flame aspect, as preceding the 3-fire aspect. And what letter is it that depicts the 2-flame stage, the first real creative stage? Precisely what the thesis calls for, the first letter, Aleph, composed of 2 yods, one above, the other below, the central axis, a slightly variant form of our mathematical sign of division, a horizontal line with a dot above and one below it. All life is an interplay between the upper fire of spirit and the lower fires of sense and the flesh of pure fire and air and impure fire and water. Even the English A carries the same depiction, as it presents the one vertical line of spirit raying downward, the I, as being split apart into duality, with the 2 separated lines still connected by the horizontal bar of mutual interrelation. So this is what he's talking about, the yod here and yod here, divided. The resulting Hebrew word then for fire is just what the specifications of symbolic representation demand. The word should be composed of symbolic letters carrying the idea of the one fire, the dual fire, and the triple fire signs, And this is precisely what the Hebrew word for fire is. It is esh, really aish, composed of aleph, subvoweled by e, and shin. Aleph is the dual letter, shin the triple, and the middle bar between the two yods is the aleph in the single bar fire. Then significantly, man who embodies the single, double, and triple fire is Ish. And then I have a commentary here. Isha is an Arabic unisex name meaning alive or living. It also has roots in Hebrew, where it is spelled Isha and means gift or desire. Also, there's Isha in Hindu or Sanskrit. One would ask at once whether the English word ash would carry the same connotations, being the visible end result of fire. It is extremely likely that it does. Not only is it at once evident in its relation to fire as its residue, ashes, but the Norse mythology depicting the radiating streams of the living fire under the imagery of a branching tree chose the ash as the tree type of the fiery emanation, Yggdrasil, the ash tree of life. And you see the ash here is in the word Yggdrasil. To be the father of spiritual life in an evolutionary cycle, this ray had to be the first aspect of the emanation. Therefore, it would be found to be composed of the first two letters of the alphabet. This is precisely what is found in the Hebrew word for father, Ab. Linking it with the Egyptian Ra, the radiant solar deity, we have Abram, receiving later in its evolution the developed powers of godhood, represented by the fifth letter, Hebrew letter, He, and so being Abraham. And as Abram came out of this primordial imperial fire, Ur, it is hardly coincidental that even Ur begins with that letter, U, which with V represents the downward line of descent, the turning upward, and the return to the heights. When we come to M, we find it is named Mem and means water. N is called Nun and means that which is the animal life in water, fish. This is in the Hebrew. But amazingly, when we return to the old Egyptian, we find that N has the name of Nun likewise, but means and is the hieroglyph of water. Its character letter is simply a short line indented to indicate 7 waves, as our English script M is a succession of 3 waves. M, therefore, in the Hebrew and in the English as well, marks the nadir of soul's descent into water, and N at the same level, and therefore also signifying water, or as fish, the organic life in water, marks the turning point for return, the Mount Sinai of evolution. Its reference is undoubtedly to this earth, which true symbolic insight discovers is itself, and not on any hill on its surface, the mount or hill of the Lord, on which God meets man in a cloud of fire, and on which all sermons are preached by his inner deity to man, and all temptations, crucifixions, spiritual initiations, and final transfigurations take place. So here's the Kemetic or Medu nature of M and N. And you see that M is can be seen on the owl's head. An owl is nocturnal, so it corresponds with the moon, and Sin is another name for the moon. There's a Sin goddess, or Sein, and Mount Sinai, and N is the waves of the water, and then there's the word inundation. Okay, so from A, the point of emanation of the spiritual fire, the creative stream of living energy, the river of vivification, as the Greeks call it, proceeded and swept downward until at M it had immersed its fiery potencies in the water of the human body, therein to begin to do its evolutionary work of kindling its own bright flame of spiritual consciousness in the Red Sea of the human blood. Now it is known that this red blood was originally seawater. As fire causes water to evaporate, the ancient allegorism represented the divine fire as drying up the water of the bodily sea, permitting souls to pass over the watery terrain dry shod. So you can see that from the alchemical symbols of the 4 elements, fire would be the opposite of water, and air would be the opposite of earth. In descending from the height of the fire essence to the depth of water substance, the energization would have had to pass through the intermediate stage or form of air. Fire symbolizes pure energy of spirit. Air typifies mind. Water stands for emotion, as earth for sensation in the scale of conscious states. If any of the letters between A and M are intended to mark the air stage, it has not come to knowledge as yet, unless it be that the bent form of the 10th letter, Yod, indicating the candle flame bent by a puff of air to denote the original impulse of God's mind on the flame, is to be taken in this significance. So we saw that puff of air. M and N, separate or conjoined, form the framework of hundreds of words relating to the condition of spirit energy when immersed in matter. As the primal mind fire is the father, Ab, so the primal matter essence is the eternal mother, which in Hebrew is Am. M will be found to begin virtually all words denoting motherhood. M represents 3 or 5 or 7 waves of water, and it should not be a matter of surprise, therefore, that we find all life on the planet having its generation in and from the seawater. Our colloquial Ma for mother is essentially the Hebrew Am, so the reverse. The creative powers symbolized by the letters at the head of the alphabet are gods, while the being who embodies God power in matter is man. The divine powers at the summit are unmanifest. In matter they become manifest. At the summit there is but one power, undifferentiated. Below in matter it has multiplied itself and become the many. At the God height the power is purely spiritual. At the lower level it comes out as mental. Spirit above, mind below. At the top there is the maximum of power, even though purely potential. At the lower range it is minus, or at a minimum, though actual in its limited expression. A man is the cosmos in miniature. That which is expressed down here is, in comparison with the superior potential above, mean. Also, as here, the two poles of being are locked in a more or less stable equilibrium. Things here are at a mean or median counterbalance. To hold this steady is to maintain life in its right poise. The father power, Ab, is the conscious cognitive element in creation. The power it wields in matter, the MN energy of the atom, is the manipulative hand of God, the meaning of Yod. And so it is that the word for hand in many languages is not only compounded of M and N, Latin manus, Spanish mano, French main, but it is in all languages feminine in gender, intimating the motherhood. In contrast to heaven above, the earth below is in Latin mundus, from which is our adjective mundane. Also from this comes mount, mountain, mound, already explained as referring to no hill on earth, but to the earth itself. Hebrew name for this lower vale of tribulation was Hinnom, or Gehinnom. In the upper realm, souls are not sufficiently individualized to deserve specific differentiated names. Here, soul gets its proper name. The food the soul eats on earth is that divine manna that was rained down from the heaven, but had to be scraped off the earth, the perfect analog of how mortals acquire their heavenly nutriment. The universal ancient tribal name for the divinity manifesting in the life of nature was Mana, Minutu. Then we have the word for the thinking principle, which in the Hindu system is Manas. One caught under the demoniac possession of this power was a maniac. Things here are the minutiae of what is whole and integral above. They are minute in magnitude and last but a minute of time, poetically speaking. Another most important line of derivatives branches off into sidereal regions. The great cosmic symbol, if not the embodiment of divine energy, is the sun. In contrast with its mighty generative power, its opposite character in the earthly region of the heavens, dead, inert, purely passive and reflective, the symbol of matter, is the moon. Hence the composition of its name in English from M and M, N, giving also month, Monday, and menses. If in Latin L stands for the divine light, there Luna, the moon, might have taken form from the idea that on the lunar orb, the divine light, L, was weakened and dimmed by the reflection from the surface of the negative lifeless moon, giving them Luna, L, for the light and N for the darkness. Or it might have been originally L reflected in MN, suggesting lumna, later wearing down into luna. Oddly enough, the Latin for light in its pure solar glory is lux, but for light in its earthly refracted, dimmed form, the word was lumen. At any rate, L and N are set directly at opposite nodes to each other in lux, light, and nox, night, or Greek nux. So he's pointing out that the L in lux and light are opposite of nux and night. Okay, so that which flowed forth from the head of being was the emanation of creative force. The divinity implanted in living nature, most evolved in man, was immanent, our Emmanuel. The accusative, objective case of all Latin nouns, masculine and feminine, in the singular number ends in the letter M, and those corresponding in Greek end in N, as also in Sanskrit and doubtless other languages. It is obvious that the M and N endings here denote objectivity, as the accusative is the objective case. The actor works subjectively in the purely noumenal or subjective realm of conscious being, but its work is to bring its purpose, thus subjectively conceived, out into the objective actuality. Hence, the creative subject force that emanates out of the AB condition of primal being ends by generating its product here below at the MN station of physical objectivity. To illustrate the point, the nominative case of trumpet in Latin is tuba, but the objective case is tubum, so all nouns. Only in the case of neuter nouns is there no distinction between the nominative and accusative cases, obviously because a noun of neuter gender cannot manifest any difference between subjective and objective status. It is not living, therefore it can neither initiate action or be acted upon by its own volition, hence can be neither subject nor object in the living sense. The principle of explanation thus established is seen with startling definiteness in three of our common English personal pronouns. Of the first personal pronoun, the nominative case is I, but the objective introduces the M, me, Italian me. The third personal pronoun, masculine singular, is in the nominative he, but in the objective it is him. The third personal plural nominative is they, but the objective is them. It is in passing to be noticed that the I is the only one of the pronouns capitalized in respect to divinity, since the I ego is the only part of us that is divine. Likewise, the survival of the dot above the I and the J is the remnant of the Yod, the Hebrew divine flame. All this induces us to think that the I element, another word incidentally showing the LMN sequence of a person, is the subjective divine self within, initiating all action, while the outer personal physical bodily self is what this I has produced as the me. So that's the end of the passages from the Esoteric Structure of the Alphabet by Alvin Boyd Kuhn. All right, so just some discussion here, and I'll just try to do this loosely. So I came up with other MN type words, mine is of the earth, money is materialism, mint, monkey, monk, Muni, as in Sakyamuni, the Latin mons, like Olympus Mons, it means mountain, and I always think that the word demon sort of means of the mound, or of materiality. So it's the opposite of spirituality, which would be angels. And angels are like angles, and so that correlates with emanations, because the light is emanating from the circle. The angles of radiation emanating from light flow outward, but the heavier demonic selfish energy gravitates inward. So again, there's that the polarity, the opposites. The letter M in the old Irish language is muin or win, which sounds like winter. So if we correspond this minimum of the sun in winter, then summer would be the summit, and the letter A, alpha, Ilam, etc. Ilam is the old Irish. Would need to correspond somehow with summer, but I don't know how. The glyph for the winter sign Aquarius looks like the hieroglyph for the N sign. So here's, it sort of looks like the Nun symbol in Kemetic. But the opposite of that would be Leo, so 11 and 5. And so Leo would be the fire, but Aquarius is an air sign. So that doesn't quite line up. If we try to find some correspondence with either of the M-like glyphs of Virgo and Scorpio, so here's Virgo, the tail goes inward and the Scorpio tail goes outward. So this is the 6th sign and this is the 8th sign. So the opposite of Virgo would be Pisces, but that's a water sign, but the Virgo is an earth sign, and Scorpio is a water sign, and the opposite of that would be Taurus, but that's an earth sign. So you see, it's not exactly lining up. And then talking about Aries, if we say that the first sign, Aries, corresponds with the letter A, then its opposite sign, Libra, is an air sign. So it's not quite the water sign that we're trying to look for. But then if you look at the sigil for Libra, so this top part is Omega. And I thought that Omega, since it's the last letter of the Greek alphabet, at least, has something to do with being the opposite of the first sign, for the first letter, A, or alpha. But, so what else do I say? This is an example of how sometimes we cannot perfectly align correspondences among different esoteric subjects. Here's another example which comes from a Godfrey Higgins quote from my Aneclipsis Part 3 article. Cedrenus says that the Chaldeans adored the light, that they called it intellectual light, and that they described it or symbolized it by the two letters alpha and omega, by which he meant the extreme terms of the diffusion of matter in the 7 planetary bodies, of which the first, or the moon, answered to the vowel alpha, and the last, or Saturn, to the vowel omega, and that the letter iota described the sun, and this altogether formed the word Yao, the Panagria of the Gnostics, otherwise the universal light distributed in the planets. So, whereas Kuhn equates Aleph to spiritual fire, Cedrenus says the Chaldeans thought Alpha represented the moon and Iota represented the sun. Yao could be interpreted as I am the Alpha and the Omega. Om could be interpreted as analogous to Yao because the first syllable A is the Alpha and the Om syllable is the Omega. This corresponds to Kuhn's passage regarding the objective case, where words end with M in Latin or N in Greek. The breath, when forming the open A sound, begins inside of you, travels upward, and ends with the closing of your lips to create the more tactile M sound. I'm surprised that Kuhn did not mention Om in his discussion. Other words that start with A and end with M that could relate to the cycle of fire and water, spirit and matter are aim, Adam, as in Adam Kadmon, Aurum, gold, and aluminum. Here's another depiction of Shin fire flowing down from the 7-crown chakra, Keter crown, to the Mem water, sacral chakra, and back up again. Shemayim means heavens and is discussed in my Aneclipsis articles. Notice that in Hebrew the ending Mem is closed. The M sound in Korean is also a rectangle. Cubes and carbon lattices connote the hard, tangible, material reality. So the word Shemayim, the first M sound is open, and then anytime a word ends with M, like Kuhn was mentioning, is a closed rectangle in Hebrew. And like I said, in Korean, it's also a rectangle, yam sound. So, and this diagram depicts how the Kundalini energy in your spine correlates with these principles of fire and water. This is the brain fluid water, and this is the atom nous in your heart. Although, some people say the atom nous is up here, and then the sexual fluid, the in your sacral chakra, and hopefully you can make it rise up to be more spiritual. Here's another mythology regarding transformation of matter to spirit, which we all must strive to attain, from Gerald Massey's Ancient Egypt, the Light of the World. In the opening chapter of Matthew's Gospel, the birth or generation of Jesus is called the birth of Jesus Christ, a twofold character equivalent to that of the double Horus, who was Horus in the flesh until 12 years of age, and Horus in the spirit from the age of 30 years. So he went through his baptism, becoming spiritual instead of the material man. Regarding father and mother concepts, as Kuhn mentioned, Ab means father in Hebrew and other languages. Appa means father in Korean, for example. Alma means mother in many languages. So Pa and Ma, such as the Sanskrit Parabrahma, the male supreme being, and Mahadevi, the female supreme being. And Pater and Mater. So here's what I wrote earlier in another article regarding Pater and Mater, which I related to patterns and matter. So it's similar, like pitter patter would be the frequency, the information, whereas matter is what's formed from that information. So you see, so what I wrote, I thought this was pretty clever. So we also see some connections regarding Jupiter, Jehovah, and his daughter Minerva, representing wisdom. Are nerves related to Minerva, i.e. the nervous system? And if wisdom is the sun and principle, the Son of God is the Prince of Peace. And what about Rhea's son, Jesus, Zeus, or Raisin? Doesn't that lead to wisdom? The planet Jupiter in Jyotish is Guru, which translates to banish darkness, and rules Sagittarius, the sage. The Roman equivalent to Zeus, Eupater, this father's son, or pattern's consequence, is logos, or rationality and golden ratios, and from patterns we get matter. For example, Erwin Schrödinger's theme in What is Life, that the stochastic Brownian motion of particles creates the phenomena we detect. So again, we have these patterns, and it's just statistics, but from that, it manifests as the phenomena which can only be detected by senses. So we think it's there, but that's the interpretation that we make from our senses. So pater and mater, father and mother. Remember, the New Testament begins with talk of the word, but really logos, this underlying structure of reality that cannot occur any other way. The way the Fibonacci sequence snowballs onto itself can only accumulate that one way, regardless of what numeric system we use, hexadecimal, binary, etc. Forever fine-tuning to the golden ratio proportions, 3/2, 5/3, 8/5, 13/8, etc. We need to connect the dots, connect more points, delineate, triangulate, extrapolate. See these patterns, see the reality, see our domain, visualize our domain, wisdom. So I hope you understood that. But, the logos is a hard concept to understand for a lot of people. And then, of course, there's different meanings to it. But the way I see it, it's pretty obvious. If you see a Fibonacci spiral, it can only come out that way because, we have the numbers, and when you have 1 and 1, that gets 2, and when you have 1 and 2, you get 3. I mean, there's no other way. There's no other way that it can form. And that's why the golden ratio occurs everywhere, because that's the only way that these things occur. So anyways, pretty obvious to me. Minerva is another MN word. The term Freemason could be seen as the fire, Pharaoh, Ma, and Sun Trinity. I'm not sure where I found that, but I thought that was interesting. I may have come up with it myself, I don't know. Here are some more MN words from one of my favorite channels, Aquarius Rising. Jimmy Johnson equates these words with the moon. So here's a bunch of words that he came up with. And I'm going to reserve this for another video, or maybe not, but here's some more information about what Kuhn writes about ox, which is Aleph. And I'll show you this. So the ox symbol evolved into the A symbol. And then if you look at M, here's M. So that's interesting, because we saw above that this looked more like the N symbol. Okay, so thanks a lot for watching.